Oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday, December 10th, 9 p.m. on the East Coast of America. It's almost Lance's birthday. It's our live Get Vocal show. What's up?
what's going on? You know what? It's almost my birthday, but more importantly, it's almost Eric's birthday, my dog. So Eric will be turning a hearty 2 today. And yes, the church bells have tolled from the center of this fine hamlet, this community in which I live, 9 chimes. That's the very idiotic intro that we do, Michael.
Happy early birthday, man.
Oh, thank you.
You and to Eric.
Thank you. I will extend that to Eric. He'll appreciate it. He's taking a little nap.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Yes.
Can you see my guitar case? Is that Eric? Is that Eric right there?
Yep, that's Eric.
It is.
He's on my guitar case.
This is an amazing Get Vocal moment, everybody. That's so amazing. Fantastic.
Well,
Wow.
We've got author Michael Lister here. Michael Lister has written 1,000,000 books. And when I say 1,000,000 books, I mean 1,000,000 books. But this one in particular is sort of based on the Maura Murray case. And Lance and I even have kind of somewhat roles in the book, which we find very cool. So welcome to this show, Michael Lister.
Thank you so much for having me. Been looking forward to this. Really
we've been extending the invite, and then something happens on our show, and it sort of is like, oh, well, this guest came on, so the timing is working out a little better. And then we're like, do you mind doing it next week? Do you mind doing it next week? Do you mind doing it next week? And we really appreciate you being so patient with all of that. And we really appreciate you being here because you are a pretty significant voice in not only the crime fiction, but in just true crime in general. You're a pretty significant voice, and we appreciate you being on the show. And all these people really will probably have a lot of questions for you.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, and I'm just happy to be here. I surely didn't mind waiting. It was worth the wait, and I've enjoyed all the other guests you had on before. So, but thank you so much for having me. I just before we start, I'd like to say that how much I appreciate you guys and what the work you're doing, and not just with the podcast, that, sort of on and off the court, and the energy you guys bring is so good. Just really appreciate the approach y'all take. And of course, I've enjoyed your show for a very, very long time, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you guys.
Well, thanks a lot, Michael. We really appreciate that, and we appreciate the support from you and everyone in the chat room. And I think maybe this is a good time to mention this, but sometimes that approach, we do get ourselves into trouble because we're a little emotional. We wear our hearts on our sleeves a little bit. And last week got a little uncomfortable, and there was some things said that we regret, and we feel like we have to apologize for the things that were said. Some of the things that were said last week on the show.
Yeah, I don't want to say I want to get it out of the way because I feel like it's necessary to say it now. For the streaming on YouTube, the streaming on Facebook and Twitter, and right here, and everybody in the chat room, it really feels like when we're here on Thursday night, we're just hanging out with our friends, and that's when we have to take a step back and think to ourselves, this is actually going out there, and our words matter to people, and both sides of the story matter. And last week we had a very emotional, passionate, frustrated, grieving mother on, and some of what she said might be true. Some of what she said definitely is not true. Some of what she said is true, but we got caught up in the wave of all of that. I think I might have called people monsters that I probably shouldn't have called them monsters, and told the listeners to boycott the advertisers on certain shows. Please don't boycott anybody. Again, caught up in the emotion. Really a sincere apology, not because we found out about this, not because we found out that people were upset, simply because upon reflecting, it just wasn't the responsible thing to do. So, Michael, you used to be a pastor, right?
Prison chaplain. Yes.
Prison chaplain. So
Yeah.
we feel like this is a very good live confessional right now. I feel good. I'm not religious, but I feel way better.
Yeah,
absolutely. Confession is good for the soul. You know, part of what I was just appreciating about you guys was how much you care. And if you care deeply, if you're passionate, if you really care about these things, and of course you're doing something that's live, and it is easy to get caught up, those kind of things happen. And what you just did is all you can do. You apologize, say, hey, if I went too far, if I said something I shouldn't have, I'm sorry, my bad. But move forward. But the work you're doing is just excellent. And I just so appreciate it. And I don't think you could be doing it if you didn't care the way you did. And because you care the way you did, of course, you're going to get caught up sometimes.
Well, thanks a lot. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it is true. We wear our hearts on the sleeves. We, everyone in this chat room, everyone listening, we invite to come along with us on this journey. And and I think sometimes it got a little too loose last week. And so that was regretful, but we will move forward and, be a little more careful next time. And I appreciate you, Michael, really being here, being the voice to bounce that off of.
Shannon said she's requesting that you call her every day to give her a pep talk.
So awesome.
We'll exchange numbers offline.
I just mentioned, the live aspect of it. You think about live performances, think about musicians, concerts, think about stand-up comedians. There's an energy there. And a lot of times that is, can get you to go too far or to, take a step that's just a little more than you had planned or wanted to. But that's also what gives it its energy and power. And I think it's worth doing. And if it's okay to overstep sometimes. And like I said, I mean, all you can do is say, hey, if I went too far, I'm sorry. And that's what you've already done. And I just think, it's worth the trade-off to have this communal live, thing that's going here.
That's great. Thank you. That's really great.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that, and I agree. This is a live communal thing, and it is unpredictable. And that you're right. That might be part of why it is so fun for folks, and it's definitely why it's so fun for us. That was a bad one, but that's okay. We will move forward. Michael Lister, let's talk about you and your writing, though. And before we get too deep into that, I just want to hear a little bit more about your background. You said you were a prison pastor. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I I was the youngest prison chaplain in the state of Florida in the early 90s. And part of the reason I had never considered doing anything like that. I mean, that was just really far from my imagination. But when the opportunity came up, I was doing research in the process of starting my mystery series, my main series, the John Jordan series. And I wanted it to be a long running series, and I wanted to give my detective a unique job. And I thought, man, prison chaplain, I wanted him to be a spiritual person and have sort of those pursuits and be looking at sort of the deeper side of life and death and meaning and those kind of things. And I wanted him solving crime and going, delving deep. And I thought, man, if he's a prison chaplain, he's going to have an endless supply of crimes to investigate. There's going to be so much to work with. But then also he could do more good than just solving a mystery. He could do counseling along the way and help the bereaved, help the victims, and just bring a uniqueness to the job of detective, but then also just a depth, I thought. And so it was just one of those things. It was so serendipitous because they built I live in a very rural area, and they built a new prison here, as they often do in areas like this. And a group of us from town went out to meet with the prison's officials and asked how we could help. What could we do to help them? And there was a group of us, just sort of sitting there. And the chaplain at the prison, he just looked over at me and he said, "You need to be doing this," talking about his job. And I'm telling you, I had never crossed my mind. And 2 weeks later, I was doing his job. And I I did it from all the rest of until about 2000. And that's when I started writing full time.
And that had never crossed your mind previously. How did you then approach it? How did you make that jump? He said, you should be doing this. Were you like, let me think about it? Or were you like, give me the collar and let's go?
Yeah. At the when he said it, I just, of course, I something, there was a little something there. I was like, should I, I just questioned. And, then I just, went home and kept thinking about it, and I had my degrees were in, sort of, theology and, sort of story and theology and that kind of thing. And I wanted to do writing, and I wanted to do multimedia kind of stuff. I thought I wanted to do music, and I wanted to do film and, stuff like that. Just sort of infuse story with mythology and, meaning. And so, I had the background in terms of the credentials and the education. And I just got to thinking about it. And like I said, it was one of those moments where the intersection of I'm about to start this new mystery series, and here's this opportunity, and I think I'd really enjoy it. And I really, really did. Even though I have the background that I do in terms of, going to get degrees in theology, I'd never been really a part of organized religion. And the nice thing about a chaplaincy is you serve all the religions, so the chapel is a place for crisis counseling. It's a place for, when someone loses a loved one, you think about they're cut off from all their family, from everybody on the outside. The chaplain is the one that has to give that news to them and then help them deal with it. And then, of course, the chaplain is the one running the AA and NA programs, all kinds of counseling, life skills, and then all the religious services. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it because I was working with Muslim imams, I was working with Jewish rabbis, I was working with Native American medicine men, and just every aspect of it. I just loved it, and it was living my research for my detective series, and being paid pretty well by the state of Florida to do it every single day. So I really enjoyed it while I did it.
And we question what's a chaplain do, but I think you just answered basically the difference between a priest or a chaplain. That's primarily the difference, right? Is that you serve all the religions? Yeah,
and you wouldn't like most of the chaplains, they have a particular religion, whatever their faith is. They don't have to conduct services or studies outside of their own faith group, but they do have to coordinate with the other faiths to come in and do those services. So it's a lot of crisis counseling, a lot of, like I said, the classes, life skill, that kind of thing. But then it's coordinating with other religious faiths so that, one of the cool things about our justice system is of the rights that people lose when they become convicted felons, they don't lose the right of religious freedom. So they're not inside. They don't have to be religious, but they are allowed to pursue their religion, and they're allowed to pursue their religion as long as it does not conflict with the security of the institution. And that was my job. My job was to make sure that right that our country affords them, it was protected.
Right.
And I took that very seriously. That meant a lot to me to be able to do that. And I saw other chaplains who they were of a particular faith group and they were pushing that faith. And so they were running the chapel as if it was just serving that faith. And a lot of other faith groups didn't feel welcomed there. But I wanted everybody, to feel extremely welcome. And I had some really moving experiences. And one of them, as I was leaving to write, pursue novel writing and screenwriting full time, one of the clerks I had was a Muslim, and he said, "Hey, they did a little going away party for me." And he stood up and he said, "There's a story from the Quran," and he started telling it where the prophet told this certain Muslim person he said, this person is not of your faith, but he is an honorable man. You can trust him. Go and serve him and everything will be good for you. And he said, that's what happened for him by working for me. And it was just things like that all the time. Very, very meaningful.
So instead of hearing about someone's religion and kicking them out
or
because
trying to convert them. That's what usually happens.
Right. Or say you're wrong, then I'm right.
Right.
You flipped that and you said, okay, I'm gonna have some patience in this scenario, and every religion is accepted. Something like that.
Absolutely. And that's my approach too. I have I am a spiritual seeker, I do, like I said, I have these degrees, and I really enjoy those kind of pursuits. And to me, they're very similar to the pursuits of true crime or mysteries, because you're talking about the ultimate mystery. Is there anything beyond this existence? Is there something beyond the material world? Is there a soul? Is there such a thing as spirit, something that's spiritual, the ineffable, the infinite, or is it just part of the way we're wired, our brains are? So I love that pursuit, but I also don't, I'm really searching for truth, and I don't care how it's packaged. I don't care which faith it comes from. I've been highly influenced by Rumi, a Muslim mystic, a Sufi mystic, and Jesus and the Buddha, and on and on and on. So that's my approach to life. That's my approach to religion, spiritual things, and that's my approach to mystery and solving crime, is trying to be open to the truth. And that's, I think that we see that a lot of law enforcement make a mistake in that they come up with a theory or come up with an obvious suspect from the very beginning and say, this is what happened, this is who did it. And then the investigation is flawed because of that.
Yeah.
I see it all related.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Before we go too far down the crime road,
no, we're gonna say the same thing.
You are investigating whether or not there's some, the greatest mystery, as I believe you put it. And I like that you don't necessarily have one religious affiliation. You're open to all ideas, because I think that's good to be open like that. What are your thoughts on the greatest mystery?
I really believe that regardless of what you call it, and I really don't care what you call it, but I do think there is something we are as humans can tap into that is beyond us. And that beyond us does not have to be a supernatural being that is beyond all things. It could be all things. It could be the actual totality of the universe. And I find a lot of meaning there. To me, the search for meaning is meaningful. And I find a lot of meaning in that. And I feel like I have a deeper, richer life because of that pursuit. And I feel like religion can get in the way of that. Again, once you think you know the answers, you sort of quit asking the questions, right? You sort of quit seeking. So I never want to get to the place where I think I know it, or I don't trust certainty. I think doubt is an important part of faith. But I do think, and even if it's just a particular part of our brains, there is something there, in my opinion, and in my experience, that we can tap into. That does make life richer, more meaningful, and hopefully that leads to humility. Hopefully that leads us to service of others, to help people in need. And I just have never found anything as meaningful as that, as being, being connected to something that is beyond, even if it's just beyond my own little existence, and then being connected to others and helping them in a way and allowing them to help us. I just find very rewarding and meaningful.
It's fantastic. And this is what you get here on the Get Vocal nights. Something totally unexpected, some deep philosophical, but truly something that makes sense. So many people get caught up in their one belief, right? Whether it's religion or whatever, politics or whatever. But to have that
theory of what happened to Maura Murray, one theory.
Right.
And I'm going to fight you. I'm right and you're wrong. It's the same thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to talk about these cases with you. But my brain is now going down this road of spirituality and religion, and I'm curious how you handle, or how you tackle science versus spirituality, or science versus religion.
So as you can imagine, I believe in science and trust science and appreciate science, and I don't see any conflict, with the two. I think what happens is, if you take an overly literal approach to religion, and you think about, let's just take the Bible or sacred texts in general. Sacred texts are written in figurative language, as heightened language. It was never meant to be taken literally. I mean, it's like trying to explain a joke to somebody, or trying to explain a poem. Poetry, which is the language of so much of, sacred text all over the world, all the wisdom traditions. I think the danger is taking it literally. So if you don't do that, then there is no conflict. There's no war between religion and science. And I keep going back to, if your goal is the truth, then that is going to come through science. That's going to come through some faith experiences. That's going to, from a variety of places. But if you're not open to truth, or if that's not your highest goal, if it's just, I want to defend my theory, I want to defend why I'm right, then that's where the conflict comes in.
Interesting. And then, and so that can be applied to viewing crime cases too, or discussing, or even writing about crime.
I think, because I think it is an approach to life. And I think you take the best detectives, and like Lou Smith comes to mind, and his work on the JonBenet Ramsey case. And of course, he had worked in so many cases prior to that one. But after that case was so messed up, for so long, he comes in, and he's not married to a single theory. He's not, he just starts to investigate with an open mind, and then I think truth emerges, and at least, and even if you don't, ultimately solve something, maybe some of the things that are getting in the way fall away, and you can see more clearly. So, and I think when I was saying what I appreciated about you guys, I think one of the words I used was open, and that's why your podcast is so good. The work you're doing, it is that openness. You're the diversity of guests you have on your podcast, and your openness to them and allowing them to share. I've learned so much, and your openness to say, hey, we used to think this, and now we don't, because we got more information, and we were open to having our minds changed because we got more information. To me, that's just the best approach.
I think there's a lot to be said for humility and not thinking you're the smartest person in the room, which I know I didn't start this intentionally going into it with those feelings. Like I didn't deliberately say I'm going to try to be humble and not be the smartest person in the room. I was literally learning as the listeners were learning. And then when we learned things that the listeners didn't learn, I think it just organically came that now the approach has to be this, because that's the way I would have wanted it. So it all makes sense. It's 24 minutes into this conversation. My brain has been enlightened, and I don't even know where to go from here. I'm curious about John Jordan, and it's eerily close to John Lorden. Was this based on John Lorden?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't.
Making sure.
Yeah.
So who is John Jordan? And this was the first book, right? The Blood Work.
Actually, Power in the Blood is the very first. I think Blood Work is about number 10 or something.
Why do I have Blood Work? I thought I got the first one.
Yeah. Huh. But so John Jordan is, he was a prison chaplain in Pottersville. And I've often said that if George Bailey hadn't been born, Bedford Falls becomes Pottersville. And so John Jordan's life, as much as we have in common and there's some similarities, he's definitely in a darker side of existence than I am. And so to me, in a lot of ways, he's what I would be like if I hadn't had the George Baileys of my life, like my parents and other people like that. So he's a recovering alcoholic who at 12 years old encountered the Atlanta child murderer, the Atlanta monster. He was on vacation with his family at the Omni in Atlanta, and Wayne Williams was in the arcade searching for victims. And he approached this young man, and he was trying to groom him and get him, alone. And John stood up to him, and he didn't know, of course, who it was. And then later, when he was arrested, John just became fascinated with the case, and he watched it, followed the trial, the investigation, the trial, and he really believed that Wayne was guilty of certain of the killings, murders, but knew that he was not responsible for all the victims on the infamous list. The motives, the modus operandi, the methods of murder were so different. The victims were so different. There were females, there were adults, there were, so he knew that Wayne wasn't responsible for all of them, as much as he believed he was responsible for probably, 10, 12, 15 of them that were those pattern crimes that were very similar. And so he moved to Atlanta as soon as he graduated high school to investigate. He wanted to try to solve the other cases, and he got caught up in he was interested in ministry. He was interested in pursuing theology. So he was there for that, but he was also investigating. And he worked on the Atlanta child murders and other cases in Atlanta. And then eventually his problem with alcohol sort of overtook him, and his marriage broke up, and he was just sort of in a bad place. And so he moves back to the panhandle of Florida where he grew up, and sort of looking for something to do, he was offered to be a prison chaplain. And so he takes the job, and people had been aware of the work. To unlock your iPhone. Sorry. People were aware of the work in criminology he had done. And so even though he's a prison chaplain, they come to him and ask him for help in solving cases. And he does both.
You're referencing the Atlanta child murders from 1979 to 1981. That is a real life case that is covered in season 2 of Mindhunter on Netflix. And this is an actual serial killer in Atlanta in the late 70s, right, which you base this story on. Is that something you typically do? How do you source the stories for John Jordan to investigate?
So there's, I believe, 25 books in the John Jordan series. And so with that many cases, they're inspired and based on a lot of different things, as you can
just going to pause there for 1 second. There are 25 books in the John Jordan series, which you don't write just John Jordan books. How many? We'll get back to this. How many books have you written?
Michael's actually written every single one of those books behind him.
I actually don't. I'm not sure what my account is today, but I would say it's probably 30, almost 40, maybe 36 or so. I'm not sure. And that's since I started writing in the summer of '94. So it's been a while, and I've been doing it full time since 2000. But yeah, they add up, those words on the page each day.
And I think at one point when we were having an interview with you, you actually took your camera and you let us see all the books. This is just a fraction of the books that you own, right? Behind you.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, I definitely have a library here that is this is my sanctuary. This is where I write. This is where I'm spending my life. And long before the quarantine, this is where I lived. But especially now, this is it. So,
sorry, if you don't mind us digging a little deeper into that. The books are behind glass. Is that they're protected?
Yes, these are Barrister bookshelves, is what they're called, and they do have the where they actually they lift, and I love these. So
that's beautiful.
I have floor to ceiling bookshelves in this room. All of, every wall is filled with shelves, but this wall is all of these Barrister bookshelves. So all of my signed first editions, collectible, important, my books, of course, are behind the glass. So yeah, makes it look fancy, doesn't it?
Oh, it's beautiful. There's so many people in the message area right now who are losing their minds because they're very big book fans and fans of reading. And we do have a question from Esther. Are you going to ask that question, Tim?
No, I was going to say it's Mike Morford in the chat room, which I was going to mention earlier because Michael Lister has written the same amount of books as Mike Morford has true crime podcasts. But let's see. Feel free to ask Esther's question.
Esther wants to know if you own a copy of Confessions of an Heiress by Paris Hilton. The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
I was hoping to be able to say yes, that I own the book she was asking about, but no, I don't own that one.
You own two copies.
Wow. Yeah, you sent it to us. Just say it. Just say you sent it to us, because
I did send it. I did own it, but then I sent it to you guys, so I don't own it anymore.
Yeah, we don't want to start anything.
There we go.
Yeah, last week was enough.
A good show so far.
Yeah, last week was controversial enough.
So let me go back and answer your question, which was how many of my books are based on true crime. And, the very first book, Power in the Blood, I was still a full-time prison chaplain. And I was taking my experiences and putting those into the book. And so in a very real way, from the very beginning, they were based on true crime. But it wasn't until like book 6 that I really thought, I am becoming more and more fascinated with true crime. And that was the book. It's called Innocent Blood. This is the one that where John encounters the Atlanta child murderer. And so it starts with him as a 12-year-old encountering him, and then it goes to his move to Atlanta and him investigating. And so that's really the first one where I introduced actual true crime into my fiction. And I had a lot of connections to the Atlanta child murderer. I, of course, moved to Atlanta. I had the similar experience to John right after high school, I moved there. And where I lived and where I went to school was very near where some of the bodies had been dumped. And then this place where I went to school, this theology school, was connected to the largest fully integrated interracial church in the world. And it was amazing that it was in the South. And the bishop of that church was contacted while the investigation was going on. He was contacted by someone claiming to be the Atlanta child murderer. And he set up a meeting, was going to come and see him. And there were actually an off-duty officer, unmarked car, and the van pulled up and saw the car, and it was not connected, and he raced away, and they didn't catch him. And then the same bishop went on TV, made appeals, was asking for him to turn himself in. And anyway, so just so many things like that that led me to an interest in the case. And then I saw a really, I thought, cool way to introduce that into my series. And that was just the beginning. And then the deeper I got into true crime, the more and more I began to use it. And in some cases, I use the actual case and I do a fictional case alongside it. In a lot of instances, though, I'll take a true crime case and fictionalize it. So I'll use aspects of it, like the Maura Murray case in Cold Blood. It's not in Cold Blood, but in my book, Cold Blood, that you guys are inspired the podcasters in. That's taking a case and fictionalizing it. And so there's elements of Maura Murray's case in there, and several of them, but then there's a lot that's different, and me taking it in ways that I want to, in different directions. And so now I've done that with a number of cases, and the one I'm working on right now and the last 2 or 3 I've written are all based on true crime cases. To me, some of the most baffling ones out there.
Cool. What are the ones that you're working on now, What are some of the
So-
more baffling ones?
So the one right now, so it's not out, it won't come out until February, but the one I've been working on and in the middle, and currently writing is inspired by the Brian Schaefer case. The man who walks into a bar and never walks out, is never seen again. I find that so fascinating. Prior to that, Blood Lure that came out this past fall, was based on the Lauren Agee case. I'm sure y'all are familiar with that. The young woman who went to Wake Fest in Tennessee and camped up on the side of this cliff with 3 other people. And the 3 of them went up there to the campsite. The 4 of them went up to the campsite, and the next morning, only 3 were still there, and she was gone. And her so-called friends went on with Wake Fest, didn't tell anybody, oh, our friend's missing, we're concerned in any way. And then 14 hours later, 12 hours later, her body was discovered in the river in a cove that, for her to get there, she would have to have floated against the current. And so many suspicious things about the condition of her body and how she could have gotten, they said the theory was she got drunk and in the middle of the night fell off the cliff. But experiment after experiment said that's an impossible. You can, a body her size, her weight, anybody, but couldn't fall off the cliff and land in the water. And then, of course, once in the water, it couldn't go against the current into a cove, and it never sank. And there's marks that it's just so suspicious. But as is the case in so many of these cases, the investigating officer came up with a theory immediately and said, this is an accidental death. She fell off the cliff. She was drunk. She drowned. End of story. No DNA is collected. No, an investigation wasn't done. And the 3 other people who acted very suspiciously and had crime in their background were allowed to go back up to the campsite. They set a fire. They burned stuff. The cops didn't just let them do whatever they wanted. If you saw the written statements they gave to the police, one of them, they're like a paragraph, and it looks like a small child wrote it, and it says nothing. It's just, anyway. So case after case like that, the Lost Girls of Panama inspired my,
Hold on, time out before we move on. That's an interesting case. And I find myself wanting to know your take on these cases. And with the Atlanta child murders too, do you believe that there were more than one killer in that case? Yeah,
definitely. And again, I go back to the method. I go back to victimology. How many serial killers are killing, adolescent or pre-adolescent boys in a certain way when they're, strangled, they're dumped in a certain way, but then also using a gun to kill female victims and adult victims, and just, geographically, it's just so when they did the trial, the greatest irony, and it's one of the greatest ironies in all of crime, but the greatest irony of the case is the Atlanta child murderer was neither tried nor convicted of killing a single child. He was convicted of killing 2 grown men. And the judge did allow the prosecutor to introduce what he called pattern cases. And so he took about 10 of the young boys who were murdered by the serial killer, and he introduced them as evidence, as showing a pattern. But he was not on trial for them, nor was he convicted of killing them. So and people who say Wayne Williams killed everybody, what they'll often say is, well, as soon as he was convicted or arrested, the murder stopped. Well, of course they didn't. It's just ridiculous. But they kept going in the way they were if you took his out of it. So if they're, there's most often family members are the ones that kill young people. And you continue to see, with guns, with knives, in a lot of different varieties, they were killed. And so anyway, I could go on, but I definitely do believe that Wayne Williams was guilty of many of the murders, but not nearly the 29 or so that are on the list.
I just wrote this down. You said something about family members, and it was obvious something that you had taken from your research. How often does that happen to you, especially now, after looking into so many cold cases, so much true crime, and writing about it and putting together your own conclusions? So you have the details that you're taking from actual cases in fact, and you're making your conclusions for your story. How often does it happen where you come up with something that you're like, well, this is a common occurrence. This is something that seems to happen all the time. And you're actually like applying that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there is, statistically, if you look, like I just mentioned, if something happens to a young person, statistically, it's going to be a parent, a caregiver, a caretaker, someone very close to them. And the more interesting cases are the ones where that's not the case, right? So I think in a case like JonBenet Ramsey, everybody jumped immediately. Oh, it's got to be the parents, because statistically, of course, it's almost always the parents, and she's found in her own home. But I think John Douglas, Lou Smith, different seasoned investigators were able to go in there and look past that and say, just because the majority of the time it was going to be a parent doesn't mean it's every single time. And so you have to, again, the one of the common occurrences in the cases that we are intrigued by, those of us who love true crime, is they often involve a flawed investigation. The reason we can delve into so many of these mysteries from Maura and everybody else that we like, and is because the investigation was flawed from the very beginning. That happened in Boulder. That happened with Maura. I believe that happened with Heyman Lee, and different ones where you think, okay, we're coming up with theories, but the only reason we're really able to do that is because the investigation was not done properly to begin with.
Yeah, geez. That's an interesting point. I mean, I know you mentioned Maura's case. I know in Maura's case, it's hard to know at that moment what it was going to turn into. I mean, that case is still evolving.
Yeah, same with Brianna's case, right? It's these cars on the side of the road in a small town, a very, very small town. They typically, especially in Brianna's case, that probably didn't stand out as much as it would to any one of us who would see that and think that that's something that's very suspicious, although the doors were open, the lights were on, so it was backed halfway into a house. But it's the police will approach it a certain way. They're not going to, they don't approach it in a way where it's immediately a crime. And I don't know if they are afraid of being classified as being alarmist, but why in your experience, in your research, what's your opinion on that? Why wouldn't they approach something like that as something potentially very bad?
Statistically, if something happens to a child, the vast majority of the time it's going to be a parent, right? Statistically, a car isn't abandoned. The vast majority of the time, someone is inebriated, they're drunk, they ran away so that they can come back later, and you may suspect them, but you can't prove. They won't get a DUI. They might get some other charge. Usually they don't even get that. So if that happens the majority of the time, laziness, path of least resistance, whatever you want to call it. And like you said, maybe not wanting to be thought of as an alarmist. They just go with that. And, that might not be a problem if it weren't that those first few moments and hours are so vital when it comes to an investigation. There's just, and you never get them back, right? You just never. So that's what it comes down to. And we all have confirmation bias. We all have, you think about I guarantee you, any of us who, drove today or went out, and to an area that's familiar to us, we think we saw things, and they were the things that we saw yesterday and the day before, but we're not really paying attention, right? We just expect them to be there. And if we were quizzed on what we really saw or didn't see, we've missed a lot. And that happens so often. And that happens to investigators.
And I'm curious if you now observe things differently based on your work and based on seeing these patterns. Do you see a car on the side of the road and catalog the license plate in your head or something like that?
I do have those thoughts like you're talking about. Yeah, because the more time you spend in this, the more you begin to see these things, and you'll wonder, is this that one time out of 100 that is something different than it appears to be? And maybe it's one out of 1,000, 1 out of 10,000. I don't know what it would be, but the chances are 9,999 times it would just be the same thing. But what if you happen to come up on that one time that is different? And that's so important for law enforcement to approach it like, let's do it as if this is that one time, that everything I do in these initial moments matters so much. And just think about how much that would mean to families, of victims. And even if you say whatever their approach is not going to bring the victim back, but they could bring resolution to the case. It could be that these families don't have to live with not knowing what happened to their child, to their loved one, or in some cases, like we're talking about, some of these not even know where they are, where their body is. I mean, that's a shame that happens as much as it does.
But wouldn't that sort of take a different approach altogether? Because I feel like there is, procedures in place in and it's a very rigid environment in law enforcement, and they're used to doing certain things. Right. I know if you were an investigating officer, you would have that approach. Do you think that what you're talking about is something that could be is that more individual, or could that be a bigger?
I feel like it's going to be both. You're always going to have investigators who are more conscientious, right? And maybe more talented as investigators. But I think there's a reason why you have less medical issues after surgeries. You have less instruments found inside people who had surgeries, or you have less airplane crashes, because systems were put into place, and there are checklists, and there's, nobody can remember everything, right? And so there has to be training. There has to be, you could put in some simple things to make sure, at least give every investigator, every deputy who's not even an investigator, but he's the first on the scene, she's the first on the scene. Okay, make sure you consider all these things. Maybe make sure you do all of these things up front from the very beginning. And if you do that, no one's going to mock you if it turns out it's nothing, and nobody's going to mock you or make fun of you if it is a drunk driver who just ran away or to hide or something. We'll appreciate that you did these things, because there's going to be a time where this made all the difference in the world. So I think training, I do think having those checklists, they're so vital to doing things the right way, and reminders. It's easy to get caught up. It's easy to get, it's so easy to put ourselves on autopilot, and we just sort of go through the motions. Of course, this thing that looks like it's this thing we expect it to be, and occasionally it's not going to be.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, and a great way to look at it by saying that the things that are statistically successful, like you get on a plane and you're probably not going to crash, and that's because everything about the operation and the function of that plane and the people operating and functioning it have a checklist. And as long as these checklists are followed, then the only thing that you have to be afraid of is something that is unforeseen and malfunctioning.
Right.
And we have good friends who have created a great website called Uncovered, and it will be this interactive, sort of an interactive type of a Charlie project, but very much gauged towards the citizen detective. And they're currently working on a citizen detective checklist, a citizen detective workbook, a guide, a guide to be a good citizen detective. And I was so happy to see that they were putting something in a document form. And then when you said that just popped into my head. Like, yes, in order for this to fine tune itself, it's been workshopped for years, and now it needs to be collectively put together as this checklist, as a systems. I think it's great.
You think about the work I do after 20 something years of doing it, 26. I trust my process. I trust the systems I have in place. And a lot of times the difference between an amateur and a professional, amateur does believe in inspiration and would only write when they're inspired, when the muse shows up. Professional is going to do the work, and they're going to come up with systems and structures and a process that they can trust. And what, obviously that's very important in surgery, and that's very important in flying an aircraft. Well, that's extremely important in law enforcement too. And investigation is so important. And I think it's often not the case, not followed. And for instance, like the Lauren Agee case I mentioned, the investigator had never investigated a homicide. Never, not once. This is his first one. And he's dealt with drug stuff, and he looks at a body floating in the river. He sees a cliffside. Oh, she was camping up there. Oh, okay, accidental death. The end. He was not equipped. And I would say, even if it were an accident, you should still do the investigation. You should do the investigation because you can't be sure of what it is until the investigation is completed. And I think that should be on every case. That should be the way it's approached.
Why do you think it's not? Do you think it's bad training, or do you think do you think it's bad training? Why?
Yeah, I think it's the culture in certain departments, and this is a small rural sheriff's department, and of course it starts with leadership. How trained is the sheriff? I have a good friend who's a sheriff who consults with me on my books, and he's a very good sheriff, and he's been trained, and he was an investigator a long time before he became sheriff. But unfortunately, sheriffs are, first of all, they are the law enforcement officer in a county. They doesn't get higher than sheriff. And it's an elected position. You don't have to have a law enforcement background to become a sheriff. You don't have to have been a great investigator to become a sheriff. So that sheriff is going to set the tone for that department. And if he or she doesn't take things seriously or wants to go, with the least resistance and go with things being the obvious, just go with the obvious, then that's going to trickle down to everybody in the department. And I think this was one of those cases where, I think it's this case in particular is shocking because one of the things we have in this case that we don't often get is we have depositions with that investigator and the sheriff because of a civil suit where the victim's mother brought a civil suit, wrongful death suit against the other three, the so-called friends that were camping with her. And so the law enforcement was questioned, and it is appalling to hear their answers. The ignorance, the arrogance, the just disregard for their jobs. I mean, what they really should be doing. It's just shocking. And I'm afraid that's too often the case.
Does that happen to you a lot? You're getting shocked and sort of disgusted like that with the way investigations went down?
Well, it does happen a lot, but usually it's just from the outside, right? We're looking like say in Boulder, you know, books came out later. And so you got a little bit of insight into some of the investigators that were involved. Some of them were interviewed, you know, after they left the department or whatever. But rarely is it like in this case where they are under oath and they're allowed to be asked any question that attorney wants to ask them. That gives you insight that we normally don't get. And so that's what makes that so fascinating. But I'm afraid that those answers that we normally don't get, I'm afraid they are more often the case, even though we're not getting them, than they should be.
Fantastic. Do you have any more crime questions, Tim?
Actually, no. I was gonna say let's open it for the last five or so minutes here. No.
Yeah, let's do that. And I also want to ask you about your charities.
Yeah,
Michael.
Great.
Because there's a whole section on your website which was just put into the message board here on your website, michaellister.com, and then you can click on the charities link. You contribute to, so there's literally pictures of you giving blood. There's pictures of you like making food, playing guitar. You're playing guitar on a broom in a kitchen. Is this what you do when you're not writing?
Yeah, and I don't spend enough time doing that kind of stuff. I'll tell you that. But from the very after my well, first of all, my background in chaplaincy, in counseling, in wanting to help people, that's been a part of what I do. And when I transitioned into writing full time, I just continued to do that because it's been very important to me. So after my first book was published, every Christmas, I began giving away copies of my books. You know, any extra copies I had, any I could get my hand on, I would give them away. And it's not, it's not that many. But over the years, I've given away over 2 million copies of my books. And I have a charity that does things like that, like helps with, especially like around Christmas time, helping with maybe people who wouldn't, kids who wouldn't get gifts. After we were, and where I live, we were hit by a Category 5 hurricane, the worst that's ever, it's probably the third worst that's ever hit the country. And it's the worst that's ever hit this area. It was just devastated. And so we did, different fundraisers and just to help people in need is what we try to do. And I would like to say on the backdrop of that, of the hurricane and what happened here, and then in my charities in general, I want to, it would embarrass him if I hope this never gets back to him, but one of the biggest supporters of my charities and the stuff I've done, and one of the most generous people I've ever encountered is the #1 best-selling author, Michael Conley. He's an amazing man, and he gives so much. He has the Bosch series on Amazon, but when after the hurricane hit us, we had no power. We had no cell service for days. I think it was almost a week. When I finally got signal, his was the first message to pop up. And he was already saying, "Hey, I'm sending help. I'm sending stuff, and you can count on more." And anyway, there's a lot of great people in the world. I don't know anybody in the crime fiction community, or maybe in writing in general, that does any more than he does. But anyway, all small stuff that I do, but just trying to give back a little bit.
Well, it's pretty impressive. I know you just said you might be, you're concerned that it might get back to him. Trust me, anytime that you say something here and you have concern that it'll get back to somebody, it'll probably somehow, in some way, get back to them. So
very quickly.
Yeah. When he texts you again, feel free to pass him our information.
I already told him.
Oh, we already did. Oh, great. What's he doing next Thursday? 9 p.m.
Actually, they're shooting the last season of Bosch right now.
Oh my God. That's amazing. Actually, we are going to have a Crawlspace holiday party next weekend, next Thursday night. This time, Michael, you're welcome to pop on by. We're going to, hopefully we can cycle in and out. Some folks here in the room and some familiar faces. This is just kind of coming together as the days go by, the week goes by.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. I'm curious. I meant to ask you a while ago, what is the significance with having blood in all the titles?
I was searching for a way to connect the books as a series, and you can do it with the way the covers look. You can do it obviously with the name John Jordan Mystery or whatever, but I wanted more than that. I wanted each title to be representative of that, and I thought using blood would be the sort of intersection where there could be religious overtones, but then also crime, and brought it together. And the longer I went into the series, the more I thought I began to see there's almost an endless amount of really good titles with blood in them. I still have, out of 25 books, I feel like there's no reaching. I think they all sort of fit, and I have a good 10 more at least that I think work really well. So the most recent book, the one that I said was inspired by the Lauren Agee case, is called Beneath a Blood Red Sky. To me, that's a beautiful, beautiful blood title. And that's number 25. So I'm not running out so far.
Absolutely not. Well, good. Keep up the good work, Michael. And we really appreciate you joining us here tonight. And we did open the box, and we were joined by a user. How's it going there, user?
Hey, Charlene.
Hey, it's going real good.
Charlene is
everything sounded real good tonight.
Good, thank you. Charlene's a fellow Floridian.
Oh, very
and
cool.
a big time reader. Yeah.
Very nice. Have you read all of Michael's books?
Yes.
I think she has. I sure do.
Which one's your favorite?
I really don't have a main favorite. I really enjoyed every one of them.
Thank you.
And you read everything outside of the John Jordan,
This
Jordan
is my
series?
favorite, by the way. This one's my favorite.
That was the correct answer.
I read all of Michael's books. I really don't read anything outside of Michael's books.
Well, when would you have time?
Right, well, that's right. Really, I wouldn't, because I read all of his.
Charlene has been such a great reader for so long, so supportive. Sure appreciate you, Charlene.
Charlene.
Go ahead. I heard you have another one coming out in February, Michael. I'm
Yes.
looking forward to that one too.
Thank you. I'm actually starting a new series. It's the first time I've done this in a long time. So the next book will not be a John Jordan book, a whole new series. So excited about that.
Breaking news. Here are
Yes. You heard it here first.
Yep. Always looking for an exclusive. When did you first discover Michael's books?
I discovered Michael in 2004, I think it was. Yeah, I went to a library event and met him. And I got his very first book, Power in the Blood. And I was hooked.
Thank you.
And from then on, I've been to just about every event that I could go to.
Oh, very cool. That's a wonderful wonderful supporter there, Charlene. And what direction would you like the character Jim Jordan to go?
I like the way he's going right now with it being the detective type and the investigator type scenario. I guess that's how you would say it.
He's definitely going to continue that. So
good.
I got a kind of a serious question for the both of you. How's everything going in Florida? You both are from Florida. I don't know if you're from the same area, but how's everything going down there with COVID and the holidays and everything? Is everyone just hanging in there?
There's so many Florida stories, right? Florida is just, Florida's a punchline, right?
No.
There's Florida, especially the area we live in, but probably much of the state, has acted as if there's not a pandemic. Life has gone on pretty normally here for most of the people, or for large section of the population. We've gotten away with it in some ways because, like, where I live is a very rural area, and so but it's catching up, and we're definitely seeing more and more cases, and more and more fatalities. We had some fatalities And I live in a micro town. Like this town is less than 2,500 people. And we've had deaths just this week from COVID. So it's inescapable. And Florida, man, just
Weather's good. The honey is good, but
the honey.
They always say that about Florida. That's
Tupelo honey.
the number one thing they say about Florida. Best wishes to Amanda Shirley, a supporter of ours and a friend who is undergoing a procedure tomorrow, and she was in here, and I just want to send our best wishes to Amanda on her procedure tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And real quick, I have 2 candles burning in the back here. One is for your fish, Tim, and the other one is for my bees. So there we go. R.I.P. to those guys, and just wanted to pay your fish some honor there.
And your bees. Well,
and you could leave them burning until midnight, and then they could transition into birthday candles, make a wish, and blow them out.
Always on the bright side. Always.
It could be, hey, one for Eric and one for you. 2 candles is perfect.
Dude, I am beyond. I have no words right now.
the blood.
I am beyond the blood.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna blow these blood candles out. Beyond the blood.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
I have
everyone.
one more quick question.
Yeah.
I have one
go
more
for
quick
it. Yeah.
question. Do you ever think of like titles with blood just as a joke? Are you ever like, I should call this one Bloody Blood Blood?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I've come up with some that'll never see the light of day just because they're not good or they don't work. But yeah, definitely have had some of both.
I need to hear one that won't see the light of day.
Maybe I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Come on.
The blood candle.
Here, that'll be the light of day.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. How about the blood candle?
There you go.
Is that okay? Well, maybe. Well, we'll workshop it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on this very special Thursday night with author Michael Lister. Make sure to check out his work at michaellister.com. You can find him on social media as well. And next week, December 17th, 9 p.m. Eastern, come on back here. Get your butts on back here to get vocal. We're having a Crawlspace Media Christmas holiday party. It's not a religious thing, Michael. No.
Right.
We're gonna tell anyone who's just got one religion and say, "Oh, this is that kind of." But no, we're not gonna tell you to get out of here. Just come on in.
Absolutely.
Anyone who's got a religion.
Nice. And I'm sorry. You're is it Charlene?
Yes.
Thank you so much for popping on. We really love it when people join in and interact like that, and we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
And hey, guys, let me say again, y'all are my absolute favorite. I've loved your show from the beginning. I really appreciate all that you do. And I hope y'all have a very happy holidays, and I hope 2021 is a lot better for all of us.